Welcome back, folks. On today's show, we have a couple of really hardcore connected lighting guys from Signify. We got Robert E. Lee and Sree, who has a really long last name that's tough to pronounce. So sorry, Sree. I should have asked you on the show, but Sree and Robert from Signify. We discussed connected lighting. It was a good show, man. I mean, it wasn't. We thought we got into it, and if you're into connected lighting and the future of connected lighting, this is a show for you. You should listen to it because the trenches met the White Tower, and we came together and we talked. So it was a good show. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by EonLEDlighting.com. That's AEON Lighting.com, baby. Greg, what's going on with Eon LED Lighting?
Well, it's a sports lighting. So for a sport facility, it's an LED light fixture. And it's made by Highlight, who owns Eon Lighting. And they are DLC premium listed. These fixtures are proprietary glare-free illumination made for HD and 4K broadcasting. And as we talk about, too, with connected lighting, they are connectable, and they make sense to be connected. So check that out if you're looking at any sport application, sports fields. Eon Lighting is the way to go.
And all you distributors out there, hey, this is one of those final frontiers of the LED lighting game. There's not a lot of LED penetration into those stadiums, small stadiums, big stadiums, whatever. Sports fields, arenas. I mean, hockey arenas there's a lot, but baseball fields, football fields, soccer fields, outdoor, man, it's like fresh meat, Greg.
Yeah, for sure. It's something to take a look at if you have any applications, or even if you don't, go get after them. It's a good opportunity for you.
That's EonLEDlighting.com, AEONLEDlighting.com, baby. Go to EonLEDlighting.com. And of course, this episode of the podcast and every episode of the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast is in association with NAILD, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Go to NAILD.org. Join us in Reno. Take some education, son. Don't be afraid to get educated. But for right now, we're talking connectivity on the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. Welcome to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast, Sree and Robert.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you. It's our pleasure and an honor to be here.
Oh, it's ours, believe me. Say hi to Greg Eric.
Hello, Greg.
Hi, Greg.
Hi, guys. Good to see you.
So we're here. Yeah, we're here to talk about connected lighting. And I know that my co-host, Greg, is very, very interested in this topic. So, Greg, I'm going to let you start off. You start hitting them with some
Well, we're going to
questions.
start off. I want you guys to define what connected lighting is.
All right, so let me take a step. Connected lighting to me really means about connectivity, not just in terms of connectivity to luminaires, but connectivity with the end users. You can actually find a more technical definition by going to LC, which stands for Design Light Consortium, and they have a very detailed explanation of what that is. But in a nutshell, connected lighting is, in my mind, a new frontier where the end user can utilize the lighting in a way that was not possible before because of the connectivity.
Yeah, maybe I can add a couple of points to that. So when you talk about connectivity, you talk about a few different levels. So one is connection between light fixtures, the part which generates lights, which in the terminologies you can call nodes. So that's one type of connectivity. And you can talk about connectivity from the light fixture to a control device like a wall switch or a push button switch or a mobile phone. That is another type of connectivity. And you can also then talk about connectivity to the internet, which gives you, remote access, for example, to the lighting. So all of these fall under, the broad scope of connected lighting. But in general, so maybe what is not connected, right? So when the light fixture is not talking to anything, it's a single light fixture, it doesn't talk to anything, I would say that is non-connected. Versus if it is talking to something else, then it becomes connected.
One of the things about the lighting industry and that I notice, we did a show on biases. And one of the things that I think is a bias is that somehow connectivity in lighting is a separate thing from the Internet of Things and connectivity to other devices. And if we're actually going in the direction we're going, which is the connected world, why does it lighting seem to think that it's separate for some reason? Why is there not sort of a thrust towards just joining the party of connectivity of all things instead of really trying to segregate out lighting as something different? Or maybe that's not true, but I feel like lighting seems to think that its connectivity is somehow separate from the other connectivity that's out there.
Let me take a stab at that then. I think the connectivity for the lighting industry can be pretty daunting, quite frankly, right? If you're lighting specifiers, the building owners, I think that when you think about connectivity, there's really, like Sree said, a different level of connectivity, right? End user to the luminaires and luminaires to the control devices and so forth. So I think that there's really, if you look at, which we'll maybe get into a little bit later in detail, from a Signify standpoint, we offer different tier connectivity so that if you're at the, using the analogy, shallow end of the swimming pool, for example, you may just want connectivity to achieve energy saving and utilizing the technology that allow the luminaire to talk to each other, but without talking to the IoT or Internet of Things. We have that solution available, which is also DLC listed, right? Whereas if you have this sort of, a deep band or a little more advanced stage where you want to extract information out of luminaires, then there's obviously added more complexity, but give you the type of use cases that a basic level connectivity may not provide. And each one obviously have its pros and also cons. And I think that's something we realize over time is that you want to give the customer the flexibility to choose the different level of connectivity to meet their particular needs.
Hey, Robert. Yeah, so excellent point. Maybe to add to that, right? So just look at it from a application perspective, really. So if you don't need remote access, for example, there is not necessarily any need for internet connectivity. And quite often, insisting on internet connectivity for calling connected lighting, makes things complicated. Getting into the IT infrastructure, for example, is often difficult, for most building, management, facility managers. Security, always becomes questionable. So if you can accomplish, for example, energy saving, comfort of the user, proper lighting, all of these application objectives without really connecting to the internet, but connect everything else, that's good enough. So that's maybe where I would distinguish IoT, which where the I stands for the internet, versus simply connected lighting. But both can overlap too, and then you get even more features. And the primary one is actually remote monitoring.
See, I think you go ahead, Greg. Go.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you think it's as simple as defining two levels of connected lighting? There is the type that does not require the internet, and there is a type that requires the internet. That's the only two levels, or are there multiple levels within that when you talk about it as a whole?
I would say at a high level, that would be good enough. When you, without the internet, for example, you could talk about, again, layers of connectivity where you can, distinguish between wireless and wired, right? That's like, then it gets into protocols. You can also, talk about, is it only light fixtures which are connected versus is it connecting to a mobile phone? And the other part maybe is whether it's permanently connected to the internet or occasionally connected to the internet on demand, right? So there are a lot of systems where you can think of, hey, it just runs on its own, but once a month or so, you want to connect it to the internet to pull some data. So you could have these type of, mix of things, but I guess, what we started with, say it's standalone, that's one system, which is not connected to the internet all the time versus, permanently connected.
Got it.
The interesting part of that I heard was the directive to find out what it was that the customer wanted, right? So what does the customer want? And from my perspective in the field, I'm telling customers what they need and what's going to give them value. And I'm offering them payback analysis, and I'm offering them cost benefit analysis. And at this point right now, I think the industry is looking at the whole question and going, what does the customer want? Well, I think that's a different question. The customer may say, I want connected lighting or I want something, but I don't think there's a definitive end deliverable they get from connected lighting at this point that makes it difficult from my position to make recommendations to end user customers about, hey, the rest is the sizzle, this is the steak, this is what you want to buy. Do you guys have any any sort of insight into that as to where the value is in connected lighting to the end user?
In terms of value, I think that using two specific example, like for example, some customers come to you say, hey, I want to have connected lighting because I want to maximize the energy saving. So that's a very hard and fast rule in terms of how much they want to spend and how much energy saving they expect to recoup using sort of connectivity. And there might be others, hey, I want to think a little more ahead, a little more advanced use cases in terms of productivity. And that's obviously a lot harder to quantify. So in that latter, for example, they may think about tracking the people moving in a warehouse, for example, or maybe using something like a tunable white as user experience. So those are the kind of fuzzy area, but we get into a very specific energy saving. Obviously, LED fixtures give you immediate energy saving when you replace, traditional lighting fixtures. But at the same time, if you are privy to the DLC and network lighting control report, which was published at the end of 2017, you actually talk about additional energy saving by having a network lighting control or connectivity with the luminaires in the amount of 46%. And I mean, the report is not getting to a lot.
I don't believe that.
Yeah, you know what? I can, well, hear me out though, because this is what they did. They use field data across multiple building types. We're talking about warehouses, we're talking about office building, we're talking about various building types, and then they aggregate information from all the different lighting manufacturers, and they're able to do some extrapolation of that information. Of course, the sample size, we're talking about 114 buildings, but relatively speaking, you may say that's still too small. Fine, but there is there's a very clear methodology in terms of how that energy saving can be produced by having this sort of network lighting connectivity. So I mean, it's a little bit beyond the scope of what
let me clarify it then. So I took
Sure.
what you said. I took what you said as meaning if they add connected lighting controls to this LED upgrade, there's an additional 46% energy savings over and above just the upgrade to LED.
That is correct. So
I don't
if you
believe
think
that.
about $1, fair. That's I respect your disagreement, Michael. But I think that if you go into that report, you can see a little bit of methodology.
I think they're going to be suffering.
case in point-
I think they're suffering from the confirmation bias. I think they're looking for what they want to find, because I think there's a couple different angles you can take on that argument that I don't think was included in the report. Now, I haven't read it, but I've installed a lot of lighting control systems in the field, and I've also measured and verified the data in the field on my own jobs. And I would say that you have to really be looking, really have some sort of advanced, highly effective lighting control system to add an additional 46% over and above anything where you're going, say, from T8 to then LED, and then taking that savings, moving it over here, and then T8, the LED solution with controls, adding another 46%. I don't know, Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the application, and let's let Robert kind of chime in. What is your application, or how can you prove it was 46%?
And I think that's what I mentioned is across all the different building types and then across different manufacturers. Granted, in DLC, some might argue that, they may have a vested interest to promote a specific, connected lighting per se. So let's kind of push it aside for the time being. But the fact that you have a report of this type across different building types and the way they actually analyze the data before and after, I think is certainly an eye-opening, and it probably by no means a very definitive study. It could be one of the first of many that we expect to see over time. But the main point is that there is a report of such quality available, and I think it certainly is worth talking about. Hey, do you agree with the 46% or not? Or if not, then maybe you're gonna get the customer just talking about, hey, there is some benefit, whether it's tangible or intangible. You get the conversation going, if nothing else, right? Because one thing I want to point out is the following: is that when you're doing any sort of building, new construction, or let alone retrofit, for example, you're putting this LED fixture today that may last for the next 5. I don't know how many years the lighting system will be in these buildings, and see how fast the whole Internet of Things can evolve. Every year we get a new smartphone, right? And so are you going to put yourself in a position where you're putting these basic LED, and then maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, your customer say, wait a second, I now want to start to add data. I want to start to collect things. I want to do things more down the road. So you have to take deliberate looking ahead. That's really the main point I want to get across, that it's not just about changing lighting per se, but it's about how do you want to add this sort of a connectivity into your design consideration so that you can really walk into any project eyes wide open, knowing that there's a potential benefit on the road.
Maybe, so we talked a lot about energy saving, right? That's definitely one of the key attributes for, any types of lighting upgrade, including connected lighting, still remains as a, selling point. But you can look at other aspects. For example, when you walk into a room, you want the lights, all the light fixtures to behave in a certain way. So that is, so if you look at the network lighting control spec from DLC, they call something called occupancy sharing. So when you walk into a room with 10 different fixtures, the first one sees you, that can turn on when the lights are not connected. But when they talk to each other, you can create a light scene now. Maybe you want all of the lights to come to a certain level. So that is connectivity. So you cannot do that without connectivity. You can also say, hey, I want to create a scene, right? When I'm doing a presentation, I want to push a button and I want the front 2 lights to dim down and the rest of it to go to like maybe 50%, light level. So there are other benefits of connected lighting. So when you go into a project, probably it's good to put all of those together. So what do you want to actually achieve with your lighting? And nowadays we talk about also tunable light. So, again, you can say, hey, in late afternoon, the light should be a little bit more, cool white to give more attention. Whereas in the morning, it should be more relaxing. So all of these can be packaged together, and the part of connected lighting, which is light fixtures talking to each other and talking to controls, become more and more important when you want to offer these additional values.
And Mike, this might be more of a conversation piece here that you might chime in on, but that's what the goal of this podcast is, not an interview. So here's my feeling on controls: is energy savings is there, sure, that might be there, but as a whole, I really feel it's more of a peace of mind sell and flexibility. And so if I'm the user of the lighting system, I want to just know that in a way, I'm managing my time efficiently. I can easily turn my lights on and off. I know a switch is easy too, but I can confirm where my lights are on, where they're off, without actually having to get up and walk to it. I can look at that anywhere. And I'm lazy. I want to manage my time. I want to be efficient. And I think that's what a lot of this lighting connected systems are going to be, is peace of mind, and then flexibility too. So down the road, if a customer says, they want a different Kelvin temperature and your fixture has that capability, you can do that with a push of a button.
How many times?
That's where I see a value.
Okay. So I would
Yep.
question that, but I'm going to go back to one thing before that. I would question the need for downstream color tuning after the fact. I would say that sure, that might happen, but are you on 1 in 100 jobs, maybe 1 in 50? But are you going to build that capability into the other 49 for the one? Doesn't seem like a great idea to me. But I mean, hey, if it's cheap and cheerful, right. Sure. If it's expensive, I don't know if it's going to happen. But that's questionable. But we also brought up the idea of color tuning and this occupancy sharing, Sree, where you had mentioned that perhaps there was some value to programming some color tuning throughout the day. And what's emerged on this podcast, talking to various scientists in that, is that they're not really sure at this point what is good, and what ends up happening is people default back to the personal preference. So you may say that, hey, 3200 Kelvin's the way to go in the morning, and then we switch it to 5000 and whatever. But if we don't know for sure if that's actually going to take the effect that, or do we, I guess my question to you is, does Signify, or in your research throughout your career, have you come across anything definitive that tells us about Kelvin temperatures, that tells us about light quality in that respect, and what people should have during the day?
Yeah, so I fully agree with you. Nothing is definitive, right? So Signify is a leap also in evaluating, what is good lighting, for different applications. So we are sponsoring projects with schools where we can look at the effect of, what you call circadian rhythm, tunable white, lighting, to see if it changes the comprehension, for students, by changing the color temperature of the light at different times of the day. Looking back though, you could, once you know what is good, you can always automate, that behavior. So the other part about connected lighting is what we call automated lighting. So once you set, the lighting behavior, then nobody has to actually go and change. This part about, people reverting back to, something which they are, maybe not necessarily, what you call used to, or comfortable with, you can automate, the lighting scenes. So it could start with a warm, type of lighting in the morning, and then later in the afternoon change to, the cool white color, without, with a slow enough fading time frame that the occupants are not necessarily paying attention, but at the same time, you achieve the result what you want. So all of that is also possible, with
Right,
connected lighting.
but Sree, we have no proof that that is any value to anybody.
Now, I can actually jump in if I may,
Sure.
Sree. Actually, I was thinking about a couple of weeks ago, I ran across this article, and actually it's pretty interesting. In fact, it's so interesting, I mentioned in my webcast last week. It actually came from a study at the CBRE headquarters in Amsterdam. In that article, it specifically called out this use of circadian lighting in the headquarters building. And I'm quoting the number I'm seeing here that says that they implemented a time control lighting system that features circadian-friendly lighting sequence, and that basically varies the color, temperature, and intensity during the course of the day. And then it actually says the following: it says the result from that study that after the light fixture was installed, it shows an increase in productivity by 18%, and so improvement of work accuracy by 12%. And this is literally in an article. I can send it to you guys after this podcast.
Wow.
But I mean, somebody actually did that sort of a study, right?
So they had,
this
did
is
they have a,
obviously.
did they have a building like a, so we did a podcast with Dr. Arnold Wilkins on LED flicker a year or two ago, and he actually had two identical buildings, and in one he used as a test case, and then the other he upgraded it to from T12 magnetic to T8 high, electronic with the hertz and all that sort of stuff, and eliminated the flicker, and he had similar numbers from that. In this study, is there a test case where these people did not receive the and we're unaware? Is it a double blind survey? I think people can report things, and you kind of, I'm very interested in reading the article, Robert. People can report things, and sometimes it's like kind of like a publicity release as well at the same time. We don't know if it's actually monitored by scientists and whether they have a test study versus this. They may just be saying, after we did this, we saw this. And that can be combined with a renovation, new furniture. It could have been a bunch of other things that were involved with it, that it's hard to parse out the effect of the light. When you do a renovation, hey, things are better or happier. It's nicer. My kitchen is new. I feel better. I don't know. So did you know the details of it? Was it
No,
a test case?
I wish I do. I'm just reporting an article that
Sure.
I really caught my attention, because Signify this year we will have a wireless circadian lighting control system. And I think that's something that, so I'm keeping track of information, testimonial and field study and so forth.
Sure.
Anything on that?
Very good.
No, I think that's enough probably for the light tuning, right? Because the connected lighting is a fairly broad area, so we can, probably jump into some other,
Sure. Sure.
topics.
Yeah. So jumping into another topic, what are and I don't know if I have the right terminology here, but the current operating platforms or the current operating systems that connected lighting can be. By that, I mean Li-Fi, Bluetooth mesh, PoE. Can you name them off and kind of give us an overview of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely. So at a high level, I would separate it as wired and wireless. So
Okay.
definitely, there are a lot of systems which are still there today, which are, I would consider them more traditional wired, type of control systems. And they're prevalently, DALI is used, digital addressable lighting interface, which is a wired, protocol, for set, particularly developed for lighting, the language of lighting. When you go to the wireless space, Philips is and Signify is, very active in Zigbee, as the standard for communication, between light points. You might have heard about Hue and the Interact, type of systems from Signify. They all use Zigbee as a communication protocol. Definitely Bluetooth is quite prevalent as well. And also the combination is used, because a lot of the mobile phones, right, they have Bluetooth. So when you want to talk, from a user perspective to the lights, maybe Bluetooth is preferred because you can talk, from the phone. But the communication between the light points, you might want to use a different protocol. That's where Zigbee comes in. Has a lot of history. So many of the large, players in the market use a type of Zigbee, not necessarily Zigbee certified, but that particular communication frequency. When you go into outdoor lighting, then many of the wireless communication protocols are proprietary. So they are also somewhat lower frequency, 900 megahertz type of range. So I would say there is room for convergence still, especially in the wireless space. But to a large extent, the system and communication protocols are based on what you need for a specific application. So outdoor for longer ranges.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So as a lighting fixture manufacturer, do you need to have your product be capable to cover all of those operating platforms?
Not
That's a great
necessarily.
That's a good. Yeah.
So not necessarily, right? So quite often we talk about a lighting fixture being connect ready. So I can give a good example on a proposition which is now, very popular now in Europe, but it's also getting standardized in North America. It is the 4-pin low voltage socket from Zaga. So it essentially is offering, so you can essentially make a light fixture and then put this socket in, which is ready for connectivity. It provides communication, like 2 wires for digital communication, a wire for power supply, low voltage power supply, and a wire for sensor interface. So when you make the light fixture this way, you can essentially prepare it for connectivity, and the connectivity node can use any of these protocols depending on what application it goes into. And that's like a very good approach for making sure that upfront you don't have to worry about what application, because an outdoor luminaire might go in a parking lot, where you might have all the fixtures close to each other. Maybe a Zigbee communication protocol is good enough, or it might go into a street lighting, a highway street lighting, where you need long range communication from fixture to fixture, and a different type of node might be more appropriate. So definitely this connect ready luminaire can be a good approach for tackling multiple applications with what is out there in the market.
Sree, it's interesting because I look at this right now and I feel like there's you have there's a need for Jaga or something like Jaga to really push forward and allow and get manufacturers to adopt not just the form factors but also sort of the communication protocols that you're speaking of, because you're just all we're doing is by making different fixtures with different form factors, different ways of connecting, is you're increasing the complexity of allowing the connectivity to take place in the first place.
Yeah. So you hit the point, button there, right? So Philips has been very active. Signify has been very active in establishing a standard, what we call intraluminaire connectivity. So the connectivity
Yes.
between an LED driver and the node, which talks outside. And then we started with this with our sensor ready SR standard. Now that is getting standardized both in ANSI as well as DALI, the DIA. So definitely now the language between the light fixture and the connected node is become standard. It's a digital protocol, low voltage protocol. So any connectivity system provider can depend on that for connecting to a light fixture. The next phase would be, okay, how do you talk to the let's say the gateway or the next level of wireless connectivity? There is room for standardization there, and we have just started the effort also in that direction. It is a little bit more complicated, like what I mentioned. The wireless communication, at least at the lowest level,
Sure.
cannot be the same, for all the different applications. But we can still standardize on, maybe the protocol language part of it.
If I may kind of jump in at this point, very add some little more clarity, is that from an end user standpoint, I think that they look at light fixture to say, hey, light fixture is connected. What does that really mean to them? There are a lot of things that has to happen at the component level to make sure that devices talk to each other. And we haven't got to that point until very recently, when Sree mentioned about like a DIIA, which is Global Consortium Digital Interface Digital Illumination Interface Alliance, for example, and also have ANSI here in the U.S. So when you talk about connectivity to light fixture, you have to realize that connectivity requires a common set of agreement among the different manufacturers and technology company, so that the devices can communicate using the same language, right? And I can see this happening because if you look at the different industry, telecom, many years ago, we have all the different standards, different technology, everybody coming out with their own solution, but then realize, hey, for me to set up a call today talking to you guys over there in Canada or over to China or everywhere else, you got to make sure that devices sitting at this different location can communicate. So we've seen that sort of a standardization, and what Sree mentioned about intraluminaire is a lot of things are happening inside the luminaire itself. So case in point, Sree mentioned about this Titanium driver, or it's a digital driver if you want to call it digital versus the analog, right? So with analog, you kind of get a perception is kind of basically on and off, but with digital, you can do a lot more. And that's the thing I alluded to earlier, is that if you put in these luminaires today, why did you want to put an analog driver into a luminaire when you could in fact put in a digital driver, so that at some point down the road you realize, hey, I want to start to extract data. These digital drivers then can communicate with whatever control system that you want to implement, and that sort of an intraluminaire communication helped make that happen.
With the point that we interviewed Dee Dentiner from Jaga Consortium, I don't know, Greg, 6 months ago or something like that. And what the point that he made, which I found was fascinating, was that when we agree on the form factors, right, then the innovation is not wasted. The innovation can now focus on areas where we need innovation as opposed to on form factors, right? So now, if you say, like, you go back, if some buildings were wired in Tesla style DC versus Edison style AC, you would have much more complexity in the environment. And going back to telecoms as well, when they agree on these, it goes back to the Second World War. One of the reasons why the Russians won the Second World War over Germany was because their train tracks were a different size. Had those train tracks been interconnected with the German train tracks, they would have flowed all those supplies right to where they needed it. So in that sense, it was a positive for Russia or the Soviet Union that they didn't have this interconnectivity. But, I think that it's interesting that we're kind of on the discovery phase, or I don't know if it is, or the industry agreement as to, okay, this is how we're going to build a socket. This is how we're going to build an LED array. Now innovate from there so that the innovation can be focused on how we're going to connect the devices and software and how users are going to interact with it, instead of, one company owning the stuff in this building and the other company owning the stuff in that building or what have you.
And very true, Mike. I think this is the point. I think that all the players that are in the control lighting space, they recognize that. They say, hey, we cannot waste our time and resource developing something on our own. We need to kind of coordinate, because you know what? When you say connected lighting, quite frankly, to me, the end game is about the data. All these light fixtures you see above the ceiling, they can potentially become call it a point of source of information about whether people is in the room, information about how long they stay there. So that you want to focus on innovation on how do you aggregate the data. So this is where the big data comes in. And then of course this is obviously the high end of the IoT, but there are also people who say I don't really need all of that, but still we offer the technology to make the connectivity work.
And one of the areas we haven't really touched on a lot yet, and I saw recently that Signify purchased 2 Li-Fi companies. What is your guys' thoughts on that? Is that something you're diving headfirst into, or where are we going with Li-Fi?
I can add a little bit to that. I think Li-Fi is one of the key value add that I think they can really, turn. Signify has this thing called lighting as a language. It doesn't just provide illumination. You provide more than just, lighting the way, for example. If you think about lighting as a language in the context of Li-Fi, right? The first company that we acquired, plus the most recent one, the Firefly, for example, is really how for Sigma to kind of push the envelope in terms of the speed, in terms of data throughput and so forth. So it's part of the company's strategic plan to make that happen. I'm not directly involved, but I have enough information to tell me that, this is the overall arching strategy of the company to make sure that lighting is not just rudimentary lighting the area, but actually do something more, improve the productivity, user experience and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can add is, so we look at the light fixture or the lighting point as a vehicle for providing a number of different types of services, for the end user. The first, providing energy efficient lighting, comfortable lighting, that's kind of the starting point. But like Robert explained, then you can go into positioning, which is a big application for retail stores, for example. The interior positioning can be a good application because lighting is there everywhere. And then you can stretch it all the way to Li-Fi, because it is there, why not use it for enhancing, for example, the internet experience.
Or
so all of these
spying on people.
Every technology can be put to good use or bad use, right?
Yeah, so we have a meme on the show. It's called The Matrix. And I've always, the first time I encountered Li-Fi, I said Matrix. That's the Matrix. We're going to be, like when you think about Li-Fi, you're literally walking through the internet. There are the zeros and ones. Right? They're right there in the light. Everywhere you're swimming in the internet. And it's what's that?
Yeah, right. It's everywhere. Could also be said for Wi-Fi.
Yeah, but Wi-Fi's radio signals, which are a little bit less, like light is everywhere in this room, right? It's everywhere. I suppose the radio is that, but I mean, Li-Fi strikes me as you said lighting as a language. There's something about it that's like lighting as Big Brother in a way too, right? I don't know. It's just a little bit scary.
You still need a connected device. So it's not a whole lot different from a phone, carrying a mobile phone and having Wi-Fi and Bluetooth everywhere, right? You still need a device to talk to whatever the communication protocol is. So it is just light is going to talk to a light receiver somewhere, which in turn, forms the connectivity.
And Mike, to be honest with you, lighting, if you look at it, is a frequency of a photon, right? We talk about light spectrum, different wavelength. If you consider in the context of wavelength, all of the Wi-Fi or cellular or 4G and 5G, they're wavelength, nevertheless. In fact, I think Li-Fi has one advantage, I don't know if you realize, is that because the light is confined into a room, for example. So if you need to have a room that has high security requirements, for example, if you're using the Wi-Fi, when things like that, you could potentially pose it could be a potential threat. I'm not sure how that will happen. Whereas with the Wi-Fi, you're talking about confined room where the lights is shining on the area, then you perhaps have a better security in that regard.
Excellent point. It's a location, specific. I mean, that can make it actually better.
All right. Well, connected lighting is a broad term, as we've learned today. But is there a country or a market that you guys have an experience that is having the most success with connected lighting, or is implementing the most projects? Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I can give some example. In the U.S., so we are, quite successful in North America with our connected lighting propositions. I would say, going back to, what we started with, right? So having the connected lighting solution tailored to the application need, is to most success. So not necessarily always the internet connectivity. So we have a solution called EasySense, or it's called SpaceWise, which simply connects the light points and automates lighting. It's a sensor product which senses occupancy, daylight, and lets you create a energy efficient lighting for a conference room or an open office. And these systems, we are very successful with it. And when you go to the other extreme on the outdoor side, we have fully connected, systems. City of LA, you might have heard, is connected with a solution from Signify. Hue is another, great example.
What kind of information?
Lighting.
Sorry to interrupt. What kind of information does the city of LA? What kind of data are they able to extract? Are they still in the phase of figuring out what they're going to do with the data they're extracting? Are they getting any real deliverables back?
So primarily now it is used for automated lighting control,
Okay.
so and maintenance, that would be the other. So if a fixture, has a defect, then immediately because it's connected. And so those are the two, key use cases. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I think that Sree talked about that's a near term, and I think that a lot of case in point. I'll be very specific. Georgia Power actually did a webinar, I think about December. They were talking about the use of smart lighting for outdoor, and something that really struck me was the following. They were saying that because of all the different light fixture that they have in that that area, they have a hard time in figuring out if the light goes out, what kind of light fixture it is. First of all, and second of all, even detect the light failures, right? You don't know where it is. You don't know what kind of light bulb or light fixture it is going out, and then you get a phone call from the customer and say, hey, the light doesn't work. And they take them a while to go through their record, which is very, antiquated. And then imagine you have a connected lighting where you can actually get information from the driver, like digital driver I talked to you about, that have information about the specific asset, light, who makes it. You can see that you can start to incorporate that information to make the repair that much easier. So that's one of the future use cases actually that was highlighted in that webinar, was that actually they were looking at a way to use connected lighting to make the end user experience better by being able to send the right crew out there to fix the right, fix light fixture. So that is really for the outdoor application. And then if you take it to the next level, is that now you have that sort of asset information, you can then integrate that with some other first alert system, or in case emergency or some national catastrophe, or there are a lot of different creative use cases. When you start to think about everything connected, using your analogy of the matrix, then the world kind of open it up. Now you can think of all the different possibilities. And I want to get back to the earlier point that Craig you brought up, is that in terms of connected lighting, actually Navigant Research is a company that we work with. They predicted that right now for the connected lighting, both US and Europe are the two largest market in terms of potential revenue, but the market that is that's experienced the highest growth is actually Asia Pacific. So you can see that this is kind of not surprising if you think about some other I would call it like for example adoption smartphone. You probably heard that smartphone adoption is much faster in Europe at the Asia country, because they don't have such a market penetration or saturation of a connected smartphone. So the same thing's kind of playing out in terms of connected lighting space as well.
I think the adoption of smart lighting or connected lighting in China is also related to government surveillance, for sure. I mean, that one town where in northeastern China where the Uyghurs lived, I know that town is basically under constant surveillance in all areas. So I would say that the Google idea of don't be evil is definitely applicable in this technology for sure. And the other thing is like it's so unsuspecting, right? You walk into a room, you turn on the lights, and I don't know how deep this technology can go. I'm not an engineer in that way, but we have to be just in the early phases of what Li-Fi and is actually capable of doing. Is Li-Fi capable of facial recognition, gait recognition, without? I mean, Sree mentioned the connectivity to the device. Well, could it operate without the device? Could it be just seeing what's happening in its sphere of influence or in where the light is shining and report that back? I think it's a super interesting time to be in the lighting business from that
Right. I think
perspective.
the one thing I want to point out, I mean, obviously, you know that China, they are really monitoring people left and right. Who you get that? But I think that you also look at another macro situation. China is very heavily polluted. And then so it's really high dependency on coal. So having LED system, obviously, how can you address energy consumption needs
Sure.
by driving it down significantly, right? And couple that with control lighting. So there's some benefit to citizens' health as well. So I'm not sure if the surveillance is really the primary motivation, because when you talk about surveillance, you add additional layer of technology, which is cameras and things like that, right? So that's additional, I guess, piece of the whole IoT that you can complement to the connected lighting. So the point I'm really trying to get at is that I would assume that the people who are considering the adoption of connected lighting, or maybe it's because they want to reduce the energy consumption, and of course there might be some ulterior motive that is up for speculation at this moment.
Sure, for sure.
And I wonder if your studies have shown if it, and I have an opinion on it, is it more in new construction or existing buildings? And to me, it seems like new construction makes sense. And maybe that's why China is having a lot more successes, because they're building more. I don't know that stat. I'm guessing at it. But is that something to do with it?
That's a good point.
So I can talk about it. So again, it's just, the how good the solution is, right? So a lot of the solutions, especially based on wireless, is aiming at, in fact, what we call the retrofit, existing, construction. Quite a bit of opportunity. There are very simple lighting systems. You might have heard about our EvoKit, solution, which is essentially an LED, luminaire, which just can be replaced within 5 minutes to replace an existing fluorescent luminaire. And that comes with the connectivity option with EasySense. So you go into a building, within, maybe half an hour, you can completely replace the existing fluorescent lighting with LED lighting with connectivity, with this type of solution. So that is where we are highly successful. Definitely, of course, there is room for more complex systems with new construction, but it doesn't have to be. There are a lot of good solutions for retrofit.
And if I can add to that, is to me, I think that retrofit is kind of like considered a low-hanging fruit, right? Because for the most part, a lot of lighting out there, as in the existing building, they're probably ripe for this kind of upgrade to LED. Whereas new construction, I think that because of the fact it's new, so you have to start with a clean slate, right? So you have a lot more options, like Sree said, wired, wireless, and you can really go pretty fancy in terms of connect lighting in that regard. So that's why I meant that retrofit is low-hanging fruit. It's not just that Signify has EvoKit. We have also the OEM customer that we support. Sree and I just something we didn't say at the beginning of the call was that we are part of Signify. They offer the LED components, the drivers, the modules, and sensor, and so forth. So we support pretty much all of the key OEM here in the North American market that we support. So all of those customers, they also recognize the fact that retrofit market is really attractive, and when you're going to connect the lighting, you can go with something as simple without having the full, I would call it full-blown IoT solution. We have that for them as well. So I think that's right. Really, in my mind, the retrofit market is really ripe for the taking, and I think that's why a lot of OEM are responding to that need by coming to us. Hey, what can we do to incorporate into our fixture so that the system they put out in day one will be ready for the future if they want to collect data information, whether it's indoor or outdoor.
Yeah, and wireless.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sree.
Sorry. So wireless, right? Just like the mobile phone, how it has taken over in places like India, for example, where the landline phones never took off, but everybody now has a mobile phone because it's like a lot easier to go and hop onto wireless. And same thing is true, with retrofit and wireless and lighting. So if you don't need to, break the ceiling and pull wires and so on, for sure it makes for an easier solution.
We have one more. I have one more question for you. When you look at the types of technologies that, from my perspective, this is a comparison to, there appears to be like a war, and then one clear winner that emerges and gets all the market share. So you have Google and Facebook, and you have like back 15 years ago, you'd have a BlackBerry and Nokia and Microsoft and all these different players, and now there's Android with a little bit of Apple on the side. Is there going to be a winner in this connected, like a Qualcomm of connected lighting, somebody that comes out, emerges, and everybody has to buy that, and that's what we do? Do you think that's going to be the way it is, or is there going to be this diverse group of companies out there all fighting for the same prize?
I can take a first crack at that. I think that right now, when you talk about connected lighting, quite frankly, I use the analogy the Wild West. Like opportunity. There's so much opportunity. So everybody's trying to get into the game. Not just the lighting manufacturer, but also control companies. And this is something I actually mentioned in my webinar, which is that everybody, if you look at the DLC specifically, right, they have published what's called a qualified network lighting control product list, QPL. So if you study from 2017 to 18, the number actually doubled in terms of number of solutions that are considered DOC QPO qualified network lighting control. So point is that you have a lot more players. So that's what I used to, using that analogy, Wild West, think of it back in the days. Everybody attracted to that. But over time, I think that you will see a little more of a consolidation. And then that's not one thing. And second thing is that from the Signify standpoint, we do have our end-to-end solution. But at the same time, we do recognize that it's important to support the, I would call the big names, the Lutrons and so forth of the company that does that lighting control. So we have them as our partner so that their control system can work with it. Digital drivers, for example, that we offer to our OEM. So hopefully over time, they will see some of the consolidation. You may still have multiple players, but they still basically kind of built to the same sort of technical spec. So you have that flexibility of choice as well. And I think that's where I see that, connected lighting, at least for the commercial industrial space, is kind of moving towards that space. Lots of players, but over time, it will consolidate toward a few.
Yeah, so I have, maybe a slightly different take on it. So in the end, I think there will be clear winners on the building blocks, what we call the drivers and, and so on, which will become standardized. And with that standardization, it will also become, cost effectiveness will become important. So there will be a few, manufacturers who will provide those building blocks. Then you go to the other extreme of the solution. And I think there will be a lot of solution providers, just like the apps today on the on the phone. I mean, a lot of people. That just makes it for better experience. So with the help of standardization, it will go into this type of diverse space. Maybe many companies able to provide solutions with cool apps, but they can all leverage on standardized and cost-effective building blocks from companies like Signify.
That way the innovation goes towards helping the end users rather than fighting over whose platform is going to be adopted, right? Guys?
Absolutely.
Thank you for being guests on the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise, ours as well.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Greg, I really thank Sree and Robert for coming on the show.
Yeah, it was a great discussion. Connected lighting is something that is here or is coming, and we have to be ready for it. And good discussion, good topic to be aware of and be ready for in the future or now in some applications.
For sure. And folks, remember, this episode of the podcast was sponsored by EonLEDlighting.com. That's AEON LED, LIGHTING.com, Greg. And they've come out with a pretty interesting package to start people, get people wet their whistles on this sports field, stadium lighting. It's a good package, man. I think, it's interesting. It's connected. What else do they got? Throw it up there for the YouTube
Well,
listeners there, Scott.
Yeah, it's an efficient and powerful sports flood luminaire is what it is. It's DLC premium listed. It has field changeable lenses, which we haven't talked a lot about, modules and drivers that you can actually change in the field. So in the future, if you have an issue, you can replace it, or you can even change the look and design of it by replacing one of the lenses. It's rugged, weather-tight design. It's rated for wet location. It took them 3 years to design this thing, so you know it's done right.
And, folks, the last frontier, as we talked about earlier, connectivity, it's one of those things. We're going to be discussing it coming up at the convention, National Association Innovative Lighting Distributors. Greg and I are all members if you ever listen to the show. If it's the first time, join us, get some education. But I think it's going to be a huge topic at the upcoming convention. Whether we have a speaker or not about it, people are going to be talking about it like crazy, Greg, bragging about the jobs they did and whatever.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a topic of discussion and hopefully get some traction in the field that we can sell more and more of it as we go.
Yeah, for sure. So, folks, check us out. Hey, we're always very grateful to the listeners. Thanks for listening. Thanks for liking us. Thanks for checking us out on the social media, looking at our little clips on LinkedIn. Man, we got a lot of traction on LinkedIn, dude.
Yeah, we did. It's a good platform for business and LED lighting for sure.
Yeah, for sure. For some reason, all you LinkedIn guys like to look at our videos on LinkedIn. We thought Twitter and Instagram were the answer, but it turns out the old boy, LinkedIn, was the one. So check us out on LinkedIn and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, all that sort of stuff. Like us, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And we're always very grateful for everything you do for us, listeners. Even if negative comments, set it up. We always respond. Go to getagriponlighting.com, go to NALD.org, and check out AONLEDlighting.com, folks. Thanks for listening.
Written on the rectory wall, there's a sign there for all. You are lost, Lord is there to find you.